Howdy, Possum Patty here. It is August 17th and I am nature journaling. I'm down by the zinnias. I am setting up the trail cam to see if I can get some pictures of hummingbirds and butterflies as they come by. And I found a bumblebee bed. Do you know where the bumblebees sleep? Well, a lot of them like to sleep on flowers. I found many bumblebees asleep in my sunflowers before. And here's one fast asleep on a zinnia. Now, as soon as the sun warms him up a little bit, he's going to start moving. Oh, there he goes. There he goes. He was sleeping the whole time I was out here setting up the camera. Now he's starting to move around because the sun just started shining on that flower. I guess it warmed him up. It is August 17th, and I'd like to wish Mom a happy birthday. She's 91 years young today. It's a beautiful day today, and I'm going to take a look at some white flowers. And the first one is right here at the end of the sidewalk by the driveway, not far from the portulaca that I drew the other day. Ooh, look. I didn't notice this before. We have a berry on the coral honeysuckle vine. Look at this red berry. Wow. I was wondering why the birds were flitting around on this vine the other day. They must be taking the berries. Ooh, interesting. All right, we're going to have to add that on. Here we have a tiny plant growing between the sidewalk and the driveway. And it has these tiny white flowers. Each flower has 5 white petals. And as the flower gets a little more mature, these petals curve up backwards. We call that recurved. And this is what the leaves look like. And where you see these flowers growing in a bunch like this, these are going to turn to berries. And the berries are going to be a dull black or kind of a blue-black. And will be in this little bunch like this. And this is the European black nightshade, or blackberry nightshade. There's a little bunch of flowers down here. This is not to be confused with the deadly nightshade, which also has blackberries on it. But those berries grow more individually than this one does. This one will have little bunches of berries. Never eat a European blackberry nightshade unless you are certain of its identification, because you don't want to mix it up with the deadly nightshade, which also has blackberries. But again, the European black nightshade will have berries growing in a little bunch, and the deadly nightshade will have berries growing individually. So this is our first little white flower for today. Okay, I'm going to do a quick sketch of this in my journal. Just a field sketch using my pen. No pencils or erasers. And then I'm going to take some notes about it later on. Okay, here's a European black nightshade over by the sand mound. And I walked over here because the flowers are further along. And you can see how the white petals curve back. Okay, while I have nightshade on my mind, I'm just going to take a quick walk back here and check the bitter nightshade that was growing to see if the berries have turned red. Okay, this nightshade, the bittersweet nightshade, has purple flowers, but they're also recurved. And here's the berries, but the berries are still green. And now I'm going to walk out to the clearing because I think I've identified one of these plants out here. Well, there's a whole bunch of them, but ooh, there was just a bird on it. Okay, I'm going to walk up to it so you can see how tall it is. And here's a closer look at the flowers. As you can see, these are done and they're making the seeds, kind of like a dandelion. Little seeds are going to float away in the wind. Little white fluff. And this is the flower in bloom. Not a whole lot to look at, is it? I'm going to take this in and show it to you under my zoomie, because there are flowers right in that part right there. On some of them, this green part around where the florets are at the end turns kind of purple. So if you're wondering what this plant is, it kind of looks like a wild lettuce with these jaggedy leaves and big stalk and bunches of flowers at the top. This is a pilewort, sometimes called the American burnweed or fireweed, because it is often found in areas where there was a fire. So this is a Native American plant. This is considered to be a pioneer species, which means it's one of the first plants to show up after a fire. They can get to be 8 feet tall, and it's probably pretty common because it's somewhat anthropogenic, which means where there's people, you'll probably find these plants. Now this area back here in the clearing, I know there was a fire pit out here at one time, so maybe that's why these burnweeds like to be out here, because there used to be a fire pit. There aren't any wild lettuces, the lactucas back here, but there's lots of these burnweeds growing everywhere. And it grows to be, like I said, just about 8 feet tall, but you know, it's an annual. So that's why it gets so many seeds, because it's going to reseed next year and then grow from a seedling all the way up to 8 feet tall again and then reseed again. For a plant that's 8 feet tall and makes so many seeds, it certainly has the smallest of flowers. And you wouldn't think that that was attractive to pollinators, but there's a lot of different bees out here, bumblebees and little bees and wasps, that seem to like these little tiny flowers. Now if you find this weed growing in your yard, you might not let it get that tall, but you might have some smaller ones. There's some smaller ones down here. If you see these growing and you want to pull them up, I just want to warn you that all parts of this plant are stinky when crushed. So if you don't want the stinky smell of this burnweed on your hands, you should probably wear some gloves when you're pulling them out. And the last white flower is one that I found as I was walking up to get the mail. So it's right off the road. Not too far. Let's see. Okay, there it is. Okay, this is my journal so far. I drew the little red ripe berry on the coral honeysuckle vine, and I drew the flowers on the European black nightshade and a couple of the leaves. This one's I traced. I thought this was very interesting because it had a smooth edge and then it had some little tiny lobes there. And then I drew some of the flowers from the pilewort or fireweed. And then I drew how the leaf kind of curls around the stalk over here. And then I traced one of these leaves down here. And I made a note that the bittersweet nightshade berries were still green. And I've got a little bit of space here. And I'm going to sketch this plant. Now this looks like an aster. And it's pretty common. And it has white petals. And the stem is kind of reddish. And if you look at the leaves, the leaves are heart-shaped. So I would say that this was the common white heart-shaped leaved aster. In your nature journal, every page does not have to be a work of art. These sketches were all done with just a pen and my journal out in the field, mostly leaning on my knee while I had my leg propped up on a log or a rock, sometimes just trying to balance the journal in one arm while I'm sketching in it with the other hand. These sketches don't have to be perfect. Just jot down the feeling that you get from the item that you're looking at, whether it's a leaf or a flower or a berry, and then take a lot of notes. Making a picture into a diagram with lots of notes and questions and arrows and labels makes a very interesting page. It looks like I drew mostly just the leaves, but I did draw the little red ripe berry on the coral honeysuckle vine and its perfoliate leaf where the stem comes through the middle, and the tiny white flowers on the European black nightshade. But I was fascinated by the leaf shape because the apex of the leaf seemed smooth, but as it went towards the base, it had these little tiny lobes. And then the flowers of the American burnweed or pilewort are very, very unusual. They're mostly just green, although some of them looked a little purplish. But the flowers themselves were these little white, pale tubes that were inside this part. And then I was fascinated by the leaves. Look how jaggedy these leaves are. I even traced a couple of these leaves. Let's say I traced that one and this one. That was so much fun to draw. This one I drew, but this one I traced. This very unusual shape. And I liked the way that the end of the leaf curled around the stalk. Then I went out to look at the aster, the little white aster, and drew one little flower here, and then drew the heart-shaped leaf. It also had a jaggedy edge. And one little tiny green bittersweet nightshade berry in the corner. So thanks for coming along today, and happy birthday, Mom! Happy nature journaling! Bye-bye!